Okay, so today I'm in Devon at Little Oakwell Stud with Lizzie Kelly. Thanks for agreeing to talk to us today, Lizzie.
That's okay.
So, the first lady jockey to win a Grade 1 race in the UK, came very close to matching that feat in France, radio and TV broadcaster, owner of Valentine Bloodstock, and not to mention wife and mother. You've been busy.
Yes. Plenty going on all the time. So far everything's been really good.
So just going back, you grew up with your racehorse training mum Jane and stepdad Nick Williams, not far from here at George Nympton. Was there ever any doubt in your mind that as an adult you'd be involved with racing in some way?
I think there was, yeah. I sort of went to university to get a degree in event management because I thought I quite like sport, so I wanted to work within sport somewhere, and obviously race courses would be a pretty good place to start. But I think I used my time wisely. I rode out for a lot of people and spent a lot of time kind of working towards being a jockey despite not really knowing if that was going to be something that would happen. Obviously, I rode in point to points. I rode as an amateur in that time. So I was always, helping myself out at the time. But yeah, I'd always hoped I would be professional. But it was never guaranteed, for sure.
Right, so were you one of these kids that was sort of sat on a horse pretty much as soon as you could walk?
Um, yeah, but not like obviously my mum didn't meet Nick until I was a bit older. But yeah, I probably in comparison to a lot of people had ponies and a lot of experiences and a lot of exposure to racehorses from quite a young age. I was like riding racehorses probably by the time I was 8. And that was, I suppose, something that I wasn't very good at. Like, I wasn't like a great event rider or anything like that, like, because I sort of didn't really spend a lot of time kind of riding ponies. I was instantly more interested in racehorses. But I mean, why wouldn't you be? If you could go out and ride a racehorse up a gallop and then ride your pony, the pony's obviously going to feel a bit slow in comparison.
Well, we've just been looking around this morning here, what you're currently doing, which we'll talk about later. I mean, a racehorse is quite a fierce beast, isn't it? So 8 seems quite young to be in control of you, like me driving an 8-year-old driving a Ferrari, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there was certainly a sort of list of horses that I would ride at that sort of age that were obviously all fairly quiet. And it wasn't until I got into probably like my teens that I started riding stuff that was a bit harder. But by that point, you have a lot of experience because although you have been riding, quiet horses, you're still riding them. So yeah, it was a great way of growing up and probably put me ahead in my career quite a long way having that exposure at such a young age.
Okay, now we're going to talk about what you do here a bit later on. But did your mum and Nick used to break horses as well? Were you involved in that sort of thing at
Yeah.
Culver Hill?
Yeah, that's where I learned really. And a lot of those processes are still processes that I would work through with horses here now. They work and they're slow processes as well, which I like. I think that the horses still get to be horses, even though they're like in training as such. So a lot of the stuff that I do now, I've picked up from various different trainers along the way. But I certainly think Mum has a real talent in breaking in horses, and something that I try and replicate. Yeah.
So how was growing up in a racing yard, sort of as a teenager?
Yeah, it was great. It was brilliant. It was. I did commit quite a lot to it. I did ride out every morning before school and sort of turned up for the school bus and sort of various, looking fairly scruffy and probably stank of horses as well. But yeah, growing up and doing it every weekend and committing to that is sort of why my mum gave me a couple of horses to ride when I was pointing. they weren't great, but managed to win with them anyway. And like the growing up in a yard growing up in that environment, I think every person who's done that will tell you that like there's sort of no work-life balance. Like it is, like training racehorses is a lifestyle, and so you're very much in that from a really young age. And every dinner time conversation will be about racing and owners and training and what feed supplements a particular horse might need. So you're very much like in it from a really young age. But I think that's kind of helped me in the long run, really.
I suppose the enthusiasm is built up when you have great success. I mean, Diamond Harry, Rev de Sivola, my favourite, the Risky Viking.
Yeah, yeah. Like I suppose I was, for a small yard, we're punching above our weight, and I think I never really appreciated that because I was too young to understand what it all meant. But it did mean that your expectations of what your career might be like are then really high, rightly or wrongly. That can be a good thing or a bad thing. But yeah, we grew, grew up growing up with horses like that. I just remember Diamond Harry and Rev de Sivola being, two absolute buses. Like they were easy to ride. My brother actually would ride Rev de Sivola like loads when he was a 3-year-old, and Chester would have been about like 9 or 10. Like those horses, they were almost like pets because they'd been through Mum and Nick's process of like buying young horses and breaking them in themselves. So when they turned into those kind of horses, yeah, it was great. Yeah, brilliant.
And was being part of the yard, were you involved with the planning? Like, so trying to work it. I mean, how far in advance would you have planned, or would your mum and Nick have planned a campaign for Rev de Sivola, for example? Would you be going through the?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was probably heavily involved in the mucking out and the riding, really, rather than the race planning. I know now that the type of horse that Rev de Sivola was, that 3-mile hurdler, like the program writes their race plans for them, really, because there are only so many of those kind of races. Like back in those, I was a kid, had no idea what the races were they were running in, like no idea of the history of them or the standing of that race within the year. I would have had no idea of the difference between a class 6 and a big race. It just, like, if you went to Newbury on a weekend and there was lots of shouting and cheering, you presumed you'd won a big race. Like the rest of it sort of went completely over my head, really.
Okay, now when did you start working for Neil King?
I'm not sure. I won the Lanzarote the weekend before I started for him. That's kind of all I can remember. T for 2 would have been probably about 5. Maybe 5. No, he would have been older than that. 6 maybe. But anyway, I don't really remember the date. But basically, I came out of university aged 21 and was going to go to Ireland, actually, to ride as an amateur. And that was sort of, I thought, I'll just do that because Ireland seems to had Nina over there and Katie Walsh, and that sort of seemed the way to go. And then Nick offered me a position as a conditional, but I thought after a season of doing that, I think it was about a season, I think I probably need to go and work for someone else. I'd always been really keen on working for other people. I'd done a lot of that. And so I was riding out for Alan King at the time, and Neil King trains like literally on the other side of the estate. So I heard that he had a position because his conditional had just lost his claim. That was Trevor Whelan. So yeah, I went up there and I was there for a year and learned a huge amount. Yeah.
So how did it compare to working for your mum and Nick?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, it was still hard work. It was Neil is someone who's a real grafter. He'd be on the yard before we got there and would leave the yard after we left, and so it was very similar in many ways, because it was like working for my parents in the fact that they worked really hard as well. And I think I could understand, you know, a lot of his, the way that he wanted people to work for him, and I could get that. There were very early starts, started at 5:30 every morning, but I kind of never really minded just, you know, getting my head down and just doing the work. It's sort of something I haven't really ever worried about. And I enjoyed it. It gave me loads of opportunities. I remember we had a really good summer one year where I rode 6 winners for him in the summer. You know, I'd never ridden winners in the summer ever before or since. But because Mum and Nick never really trained summer horses. So yeah, it was good. I feel like I learned a lot. I feel like the two part that he was a really integral part of my career at a really important stage where the owners at home wanted to see me riding more when it wasn't on their horses before they were willing to give me a go of riding their horses. But also, you know, Neil King's owners wanted the same. And so the two sort of started to build off the back of each other. And so it meant that I probably progressed very quickly in that season that I was with Neil. He was also really understanding of my commitments to like home horses as well. Like obviously I had to put him first. He was my boss. But I think both parties really tried to work with each other for my benefit, which, like, you know, looking back on that now, could have been it could have been a horrible situation where you could have been, you know, dragged between the two different yards, but actually like they worked in tandem as best they could, and I did very well out of it.
Okay, and how long did you ride Point to Points for?
Would have been 5 years, I think.
So was that a good grounding for your professional career?
Oh yeah, definitely. You could make mistakes in point to points that, not that you get away with, but you know, you're not televised, and it is an amateur sport, and people understand it's an amateur sport, so you can make mistakes. It's a good opportunity to kind of have like first outside rides and have to go into a paddock and talk to owners that you've never met before, and you know, start to develop your kind of patter, if you like, in the weighing room, not in the weighing room, in the parade ring beforehand. I think that was all really important. Getting to understand the weighing room and how it works and sort of where your boundaries are of what you can and can't do. Yeah, I loved pointing, and I rode with some, you know, brilliant people, good people, and I always thought that it was a really good place to learn what you're doing, really.
It toughen you up a bit as well, because the facilities in the winter aren't exactly salubrious, are they?
No. Yeah, we used to get changed in all sorts of, you know, random. I remember we had like a sort of 3-man tent at one point to point once for about like, it must have been about 7 or 8 of us girls getting changed in this tiny tent. Yeah, so yeah, you definitely just had to learn to get on with it.